Galadriel did everything right, and still, it was not enough. Before she was named the Lady of the Golden Wood, Galadriel was of the high kindred of the Noldor, born in the light of Valinor, yet unwilling to dwell there. She beheld the ruin of Beleriand, the pride and the folly of her own people, and the long shadow of Sauron rising, yet still she endured. Her strength was not of steel, nor counted in beauty or renown, but of a will that the shadow could not master. Galadriel was born in Aman during the years of the trees, in a time when the world was still whole. There was no sun, no moon, and no sense of passing days as later ages would know them. Light did not rise and fall, it endured. Telperion cast silver radiance across the land, and Lorelin answered with gold. Under that light, nothing aged in haste, nothing decayed, and nothing truly seemed capable of being lost. This was the first world Galadriel knew, and it shaped her more deeply than any later hardship. In this world, doing the right thing was enough. She was born Artenis, noble woman, daughter of Finarfin of the Noldor and Erwin of the Teleri. Her lineage placed her at the heart of Elvish history. Finarfin was the youngest son of Finwë, High King of the Noldor, a man known not for fiery ambition, but for measured wisdom and loyalty to the Valar. Erwin, her mother, came from Alquilanda by the sea, daughter of Olwë, Lord of the Teleri. From her father came intellect, ambition, and the desire to shape the world. From her mother came patience, memory, and an instinctive resistance to needless destruction. From the earliest years of her life, Galadriel was observed closely by those around her. Tolkien describes her as strong of body, mind, and will, and even among the Eldar she was considered unusual. She was tall, physically powerful, and possessed of a stillness that made others pause. She did not rush into speech. She watched. She listened. And when she spoke, it was clear she had already thought longer and deeper than most. During the long centuries of the years of the trees, Galadriel was educated as all noble Noldor were. She learned lore, languages, history, and the arts of craft and governance. She listened to the Valar speak of the music of the Ainur and the shaping of the world. She saw how order was maintained without force, how beauty was preserved without effort. And yet, over time, something in her began to resist that perfection. Valinor did not change. Nothing truly new could arise there. Every wrong could be corrected. Every loss could be undone. Here, wisdom meant safety. And Galadriel, unlike many of her kin, began to sense that a world without risk was also a world without true choice. Later, Tolkien would write that she possessed a pride equal to that of Feanor, but unlike him, her pride was controlled, disciplined, and patient. It did not burn, it waited. And yet, when the moment came to choose, she chose exile. She chose carefully. The world would not. This decision was not impulsive. It was not made in anger or fear. It was made with full understanding of the cost. Tolkien later wrote that Galadriel went into exile because she desired to rule a realm of her own. She rejected Feanor's methods, but not the idea that Middle-earth lay open before her as a place where her will could finally be tested. After the destruction of the two trees and the first rising of the moon, Galadriel left Aman with the host of the Noldor who refused to turn back. Unlike many others, she did not sail east. She crossed the Helcaraxe, the grinding ice, in the far north. This was not a path chosen for glory. It was a path chosen because she would not accept forgiveness yet. The crossing of Helcaraxe was a defining ordeal. The ice was endless. The cold was merciless. There were no songs, no victories, only exhaustion and death. Many elves perished without ever reaching Middle-earth. Galadriel survived through endurance, discipline, and refusal to surrender. This journey stripped away any lingering illusion that power alone could overcome the world. It taught her that survival often depends not on strength, but on restraint. She endured what others could not. The world still broke. With the rising of the sun, the first age of the world began, and Galadriel finally entered Beleriand. The land she found was already marked by war. Morgoth ruled from Angband, and the Noldoran kingdoms that had arrived before her were locked in a desperate struggle against him. Rather than joining the courts of the sons of Feanor, Galadriel traveled south to Doriath, the hidden realm of King Thingol and Queen Melian. Doriath was unlike any realm she had seen. It was not built on open power or military might. It was protected by enchantment, secrecy, and foresight. At its heart stood Melian. Melian was not an elf. She was a Maya, one of the same order of beings as Sauron, though untouched by corruption. Galadriel recognized this immediately. In Melian, she encountered a form of power that dwarfed even the greatest of the Eldar, and yet Melian did not seek conquest, recognition, or dominion. Tolkien writes that Galadriel learned great lore and wisdom from Melian. Their conversations were long and unhurried. Melian did not instruct Galadriel as a teacher commands a student. She allowed her to observe, to question, to reflect. Through Melian, Galadriel learned that true authority does not require enforcement, and that foresight is often more powerful than strength. This relationship reshaped Galadriel profoundly. Melian showed her that power could exist without pride, that preservation required humility, and that restraint was not weakness but mastery. These lessons would echo through every later decision Galadriel made. She learned restraint. It did not stop the war. It was in Doriath, during these years of learning and quiet growth, that Galadriel met Celeborn. Celeborn was of a Sindar, the Grey Elves, shaped entirely by Middle-earth. He had not lived beneath the two trees. He had known loss, fear, and the long shadow of Morgoth. Where Galadriel carried the memory of perfection, Celeborn carried acceptance of imperfection. Their bond formed slowly, built not on ambition, but on mutual respect. Tolkien places their meeting in Doriath and their union during the First Age. Their marriage bound Galadriel permanently to Middle-earth. Through Celeborn, she became part of a people who did not seek to recreate Valinor, but to endure the world as it was. As the First Age progressed, Galadriel watched the slow destruction of everything around her. Nargothrond fell. Gondolin was betrayed. Doriath itself was eventually ruined by greed and tragedy. The land that had sheltered her learning was destroyed, and Melian departed Middle-earth. Then came the War of Wrath. Morgoth was finally defeated, but the victory shattered Beleriand itself. The land was torn apart. Forests sank beneath the sea. Mountains were broken. The world Galadriel had come to know simply ceased to exist. Wisdom survived, the world did not. The Second Age began in the aftermath of that destruction. For Galadriel, this new age did not begin with celebration or hope. It began with dislocation. The world she had committed herself to was still standing, but it was wounded, unstable, and deeply uncertain. The great elven kingdoms of the First Age were gone. Their survivors were scattered, and the question that now faced every remaining power in Middle-earth was simple, but terrifying. What comes after survival? Galadriel did not answer this question immediately. Together with Celeborn, she began a long period of wandering. These were not years, but centuries. They traveled eastward beyond the ruins of Beleriand, into lands that had once been distant frontiers. This movement was not conquest. Galadriel was not raising armies or claiming crowns. She was watching, listening, and judging. She wanted to understand what kind of world Middle-earth was becoming without Morgoth, and whether it could be guided without repeating the same mistakes. Early in the Second Age, Galadriel and Celeborn dwelled for a time near Lake Nanuiel, and later in regions that bordered the Misty Mountains. These lands were quieter, less scarred by war, but also more vulnerable. Without great powers to guard them, they would either fade or fall. Galadriel saw this clearly. The lesson of Beleriand had not been that power was evil. It was that power without wisdom was catastrophic. As centuries passed, new realms began to rise. Among them was Ytraint, a land settled by the Noldor near the western gates of Khazad-dûm. The elves of Ereption were craftsmen above all else, heirs to the tradition of Feanor, but without his madness. They sought not domination, but mastery of craft. They wanted to preserve beauty against time itself. This goal resonated deeply with Galadriel. She spent long periods in and around Indierun Lake. Many of the Noldor there, she did not believe that skill alone could save them. She had seen too many great works become instruments of ruin. And it was during this time that a familiar unease began to return. The sense that something ancient and patient was moving once more in the shadows of the world. Around the year 1200 of the Second Age, a figure appeared among the elves, calling himself Annatar, the Lord of Gifts. He was fair of form, eloquent in speech, and generous with knowledge. He spoke of healing the hurts of the world, of restoring what had been lost, and of ordering Middle-earth so that it would never again descend into chaos. Many elves welcomed him. Galadriel did not. From the moment Annatar spoke, she recognized the pattern. His words echoed those she had heard before in Aman, long before the fall of the two trees. He did not command, he persuaded. He did not threaten, he promised improvement. In Unfinished Tales, Tolkien writes that Galadriel perceived at once that there was an evil will at work in him, even though she did not yet know his true identity. This made her dangerous to him. Galadriel opposed Annatar openly, warning the elves of Eregion that they were being led to dependence. The craftsmen of Eregion, led by Celebrimbor, chose to listen to Annatar. They believed they could take his knowledge without accepting his authority. This belief would doom them. Political tension followed. Galadriel's opposition isolated her, and eventually she withdrew from Eregion entirely. This withdrawal was not defeat, it was survival. When Sauron finally revealed himself and attacked Eregion in the year 1697 of the Second Age, the realm was destroyed. Celebrimbor was killed. The rings of power were seized or scattered. Galadriel lived because she had refused to trust what seemed too perfect. She saw the truth. She had no power to act on it. Among the rings that escaped Sauron's grasp were the 3 rings of the elves, forged without his direct involvement. One of these was Nenya, the Ring of Water, which came into Galadriel's keeping. Unlike the others, Nenya was not made to dominate minds or command armies. Its power was subtle. It preserved. It concealed. It resisted decay. Galadriel understood its danger immediately. To wield Nenya was to interfere with the natural passing of time. To use it was to decide what should endure and what should fade. This was not tyranny, but it was not innocence either. Galadriel accepted this burden with full awareness of its cost. With Nenya, she and Celeborn established Lothlorien. The land was not chosen for glory or strategic advantage. It was chosen because it could be protected without expansion. Lorien became a realm unlike any other in Middle-earth, not frozen in time, but slowed, held gently against the weariness of the world. Years became centuries, centuries became millennia. Throughout the long Second Age, Galadriel ruled Lorien with restraint. She did not seek empire. She did not challenge rising powers openly. When Numenor rose in the west and later fell into shadow, Galadriel watched from afar. When Sauron was defeated at the end of the Second Age and the One Ring was lost, she did not rejoice. She understood too well that evil rarely ends. It waits. The Third Age began in uncertainty. Sauron was diminished but not destroyed. The One Ring was lost but not unmade. And Galadriel knew that as long as it endured, her own power, and the power of Nenya, was tied to its fate. For over 3,000 years of the Third Age, Galadriel remained in Lothlorien. Empires rose and fell beyond its borders. Men forgot ancient lessons. Dwarves delved too deep. And slowly, inevitably, the shadow returned. She preserved what could be saved, not what had to be changed. When at last the Fellowship of the Ring entered Lorien in the year 3019 of the Third Age, Galadriel knew that the long arc of her life was nearing its final test. She had waited for this moment longer than any of them could imagine. When Frodo offered her the One Ring, he did so freely, without coercion. And in that moment, Galadriel faced not Sauron, but herself. As she had been in Aman, as she had been in exile, as she had been through every choice that followed. She spoke the truth aloud. In place of the dark lord you will set up a queen, and I shall not be dark, but beautiful and terrible as the morning and the night. She saw it clearly, and then she refused it. I passed the test. I will diminish and go into the west and remain Galadriel. With those words, the desire that had driven her since the years of the trees was finally laid down. She passed the test, when there was nothing left to lose. But the world did not end in that moment, and neither did Galadriel's duty. The War of the Ring was still being fought beyond the borders of Lothlorien. Even after the Fellowship departed, the shadow pressed close. Sauron's forces tested the borders of the Golden Wood, and 3 times his armies came against it. Orcs crossed the Anduin. Darkness gathered beneath the trees. Yet Lorien did not fall. Galadriel did not ride out to meet the enemy in open war. Instead, she defended her realm as she always had, through foresight, concealment, and restraint. The power of Nenya still endured, and with it, the protection of the land. But Galadriel knew now, with absolute certainty, that this protection was living on borrowed time. In the year 3019 of the Third Age, the One Ring was destroyed in the fires of Mount Doom. Sauron was overthrown at last, not merely diminished as before, but unmade. The great shadow that had shaped Galadriel's entire life, from Melkor's whispers in Valinor to Anatar's lies in Eregion, was finally gone. Victory came quietly to Lothlorien. There were no great celebrations, no proclamations of triumph. Instead, Galadriel felt the change immediately. The power of Nenya faded. The unnatural preservation of the land loosened its grip. Time, long held at bay, began to move again. Trees that had stood unchanged for centuries began to alter with the seasons. The light beneath the leaves softened. The air itself felt different. Lorien was not destroyed, but it was no longer untouched by the passing of the world. Galadriel did not resist this change. This was the final proof of her transformation. In earlier ages, she would have fought to preserve what she loved at any cost. She would have searched for another source of power, another means of control. Now, she did nothing. She allowed the land to age with grace. Celeborn remained for a time, helping to lead the elves who chose to stay behind. But Galadriel knew that her own role in Middle-earth was ending. The purpose that had kept her in exile for so long had finally been fulfilled, not through domination, but through refusal. In the years following the War of the Ring, Galadriel traveled once more. She went to Rivendell, where she met with Elrond, who had shared much of her long vigilance. She visited the borders of the Shire, seeing with her own eyes the quiet courage of the people who had carried the fate of the world without seeking glory. These journeys were not strategic. They were farewells. In the year 3021 of the Third Age, the last ship prepared to sail from the Grey Havens. On its deck stood the last guardians of the Elder Days, Elrond, Gandalf, and Galadriel. As Galadriel stood at the shore, the sea before her, the world behind her, her exile at last came to its true end. She had left Aman thousands of years earlier because she believed her strength demanded expression, that her wisdom must shape the world directly. She had crossed ice and war and ruin to prove that belief. She had ruled realms, wielded one of the rings of power, and resisted temptation that would have broken almost any other being. And now, at the end of the Third Age, she no longer needed to prove anything. When the ship departed, Tolkien tells us that Galadriel passed over the sea and came again to the Blessed Realm. This time, she did not return as a rebel, nor as one who demanded independence from the Valar. She returned having learned what Valinor could never teach her alone: the cost of power, the pain of loss, and the necessity of letting go. Her story is often misunderstood as one of purity and light. In truth, it is a story of struggle. Galadriel was proud. Tolkien never hides this. She desired rule. She wished to shape the world according to her vision. What sets her apart is not the absence of temptation, but the length of time it took her to overcome it. From Aman to Middle-earth, from the years of the trees to the end of the Third Age, Galadriel lived with a single unresolved question: whether power exists to command the world or to serve it. Her final answer was not spoken in triumph, but in humility. "I will diminish," she said. And in that choice, she achieved something no realm, no ring, and no throne ever could. She remained Galadriel. Nothing more could be demanded of her. She did everything right, and still, the world could not be saved. If you wish to explore even deeper into the ancient history of Arda, go watch our next video about the Nazgul and their destiny. Thank you for watching, and if you want more tales from Middle-earth, join us and subscribe so you don't miss the next story.